The alarms screamed through every corridor of Thessera Prime's orbital defense station. Ambassador Kale's elegant feathers ruffled in distress as he watched the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen like a plague of locusts. The Chromath swarm had arrived without warning, and they brought death with them. "How many ships?" Kale asked, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. "Over 300 capital vessels, Ambassador. Thousands of smaller craft." The young officer's voice shook. Our fleet is gone. They destroyed everything in the first wave." Kale felt his heart sink. The Velaran people had enjoyed peace for so long that they had forgotten what real war looked like. Their ships were beautiful, elegant things designed for exploration and diplomacy. The Chromath vessels were ugly, brutal, and built for one purpose only: killing and consuming. "Send the distress signal. All coalition frequencies. Tell them we need immediate assistance." Kyle straightened his diplomatic robes, trying to maintain dignity even as his world burned. "Tell them Thessera Prime is falling." The message went out across the stars. 17 species responded within the hour. The Saurians expressed their deepest sympathies, but their fleet was 3 days away. The Quen offered prayers and promised ships in 4 days. The Pharos sent condolences and regrets. Every response was the same: too far away, too slow, too late. Kyle watched the surface of his homeworld through the observation window. Fires bloomed across the southern continent where the Chromath had begun landing. His people were dying down there. His family was down there. "Ambassador, we have another response." The communications officer sounded confused. "It's from humans." The room went silent. Humans. The aggressive species from the death world called Earth. The same species the Coalition had rejected 2 years ago, calling them too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable for civilized space. Kyle had voted for that rejection himself. "What do they say?" Kale asked quietly. The officer played the message. A human male appeared on screen wearing a dark military uniform. His face was weathered, his eyes hard but not cruel. "This is Captain Day Choi of the Earth Destroyer Indomitable. We received your distress call. We're 3 hours out. Hold on. 3 hours." The humans were 3 hours away. Kyle felt hope flicker in his chest. Then doubt crushed it. What could one human ship do against 300 Chromath vessels? And did Kale really want to accept help from the species his people had rejected? "Ambassador, the Council is requesting your decision." The officer looked at him with desperate eyes. "Do we accept the human assistance?" Kyle thought about his daughter, only 8 years old, hiding in a shelter beneath the capital city. He thought about the millions of Velaran citizens facing the Chromath swarm. He thought about pride and principles and politics. Then he thought about survival. "Send our coordinates. Tell them we accept their help. Tell them—" Kyle paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell them we are grateful." The officer sent the message. Kyle waited, expecting some demand for payment or political concessions. That was how things worked in the Coalition. Every species had an angle, a price, something they wanted in return. The human captain's response was simple: understood. Coordinates received. Choi out. That was it. No demands, no negotiations, just acknowledgement and action. "Ambassador, more human ships are appearing on long-range sensors." The tactical officer sounded shocked. 7 vessels total. 3 destroyers, 2 frigates, 1 carrier, and... "I think that's a hospital ship." "A hospital ship?" Kale echoed. "Why would they bring a medical vessel to a combat zone?" "They're burning their engines at maximum. They'll arrive in 3 hours, but..." The officer hesitated. "Sir, our data says human ships shouldn't be able to maintain those speeds without tearing apart. The gravitational stress alone should destroy their hulls." Kyle watched the blue dots on the display rushing toward his dying world. The humans were pushing their ships beyond safe limits, risking their own lives to arrive faster. These were the same humans the Coalition had called reckless and suicidal. Perhaps the Coalition had been right about that. But right now, Kale needed reckless. He needed someone willing to take insane risks for people they didn't even know. The next 3 hours were the longest of Kale's life. He watched helplessly as the Chromath swarm tightened around Thessera Prime. The orbital defense platforms fell one by one. Landing craft descended like rain, disgorging thousands of insectoid warriors onto the surface. Communications from the cities became more desperate, more terrible. His daughter's shelter sent a final transmission. They were breaking through the doors. Then silence. Kyle closed his eyes and prayed to gods he wasn't sure existed anymore. Ambassador, the humans are arriving. Kale's eyes snapped open. The display showed the human fleet dropping out of hyperspace directly into the combat zone. No cautious approach. No safe distance calculations. They appeared right in the middle of the Chromath swarm, their weapons already firing. That's impossible, the tactical officer whispered. The gravitational shear from exiting hyperspace that close to a planet should have ripped them apart. But the humans were still intact, still fighting. Their ships looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the Coalition. They were blocky, angular things covered in armor and weapons. They looked like they were designed by people who expected to get hit and wanted to hit back harder. The lead destroyer, the Indomitable, charged straight at a Chromath battlecruiser 3 times its size. Kale watched in disbelief as the human ship opened fire with weapons he'd never seen before. Metal slugs moving at incredible speeds tore through the Chromath vessel's organic armor. Missiles erupted from launch tubes, each carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. The Chromath battlecruiser tried to turn, tried to bring its own weapons to bear. The Indomitable didn't give it time. The human destroyer rammed straight through the alien ship, tearing it in half with sheer kinetic force and point-blank weapons fire. By the ancestors, Kale breathed. They're insane. No, Ambassador, the tactical officer said, his voice filled with awe. They're winning. The human carrier launched small fighter craft that dove through the Chromath formations like predatory birds. The frigates formed a defensive line and started systematically destroying landing craft before they could reach the surface. And the hospital ship moved into orbit, already broadcasting medical assistance frequencies to the surviving Velaran platforms. Lieutenant Hannah Park's voice came over the general frequency from the Indomitable. She sounded calm despite the chaos. Thessera Prime Defense Forces, this is the Earth Fleet. Transmit locations of any trapped civilians or critical infrastructure. We're clearing a path. Kale found himself transmitting coordinates before he even realized he was moving. His daughter's shelter, 3 hospitals. The Capitol building where thousands had taken refuge. Received, Hannah replied. Drop teams are launching now. Hold your position, Ambassador. The cavalry has arrived. Kyle watched through the observation window as human drop pods descended through the atmosphere like falling stars. They crashed into the planet's surface near his daughter's shelter, and armored figures emerged, weapons blazing. For the first time in hours, Kale let himself hope. The humans had come. Against all logic, against all expectation, despite being rejected and scorned by the Coalition, they had come. And they were fighting like the entire galaxy depended on it. Kale realized something profound in that moment. Perhaps the Coalition had been wrong about the humans. Not about their capacity for violence, that was clearly real. But about what that violence meant. The humans weren't monsters. They were warriors. And right now, Thessera Prime needed warriors more than it had ever needed anything else. Commander Una Bay gripped the arms of her command chair as the carrier Defiant Storm shook from weapons fire. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency despite the chaos outside. She watched the tactical display, counting enemy ships, calculating odds, and accepting what the numbers told her. They were going to lose. Badly. The Chromath outnumbered them 50-1. By every military doctrine taught in every academy, human or otherwise, the correct action was retreat. Preserve the fleet. Live to fight another day. Except that some battles couldn't be won. Una had never been very good at accepting things. All fighters. This is Defiant Actual. Launch when ready. Target priority is landing craft. Keep them off the surface. She switched channels. Indomitable, we'll screen your approach. Make it count. Captain Day's voice came back, steady and calm. Copy that, Defiant. We're going in. Yuna watched the Indomitable accelerate toward the heart of the Chromath formation. The destroyer's hull was already scarred from the ramming attack, but its weapons hadn't stopped firing for even a second. Railguns hurled metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Missile tubes launched warheads in steady streams. Point defense lasers created a web of light that destroyed anything that got too close. "Commander, we're receiving reports from the surface." Lieutenant Hana's voice came through from the Indomitable. "Major Hyun's drop teams have secured 3 civilian shelters. Enemy resistance is heavy." Heavy. That was a gentle way of saying that human Marines were fighting hand-to-hand against Chromath warriors that outweighed them 2-to-1, and had natural armor that could stop most small arms fire. Yuna had seen Hyun train his Marines. She knew what heavy resistance meant to them. It meant they were exactly where they wanted to be. Defiant Actual, this is Red Leader. Fighter wing away and engaging. The fighter squadron commander sounded young, eager. Hostile landing craft marked. Beginning attack runs. Yuna switched her view to the fighter wing's perspective. 40 small craft dove through the Chromath formation like sharks through a school of fish. The Chromath had numbers, but human pilots had spent their entire lives training for 3-dimensional combat in zero gravity. Every coalition species flew spacecraft. Humans were born for it. Red Leader's fighter twisted through a storm of weapons fire that should have destroyed it 10 times over. Instead, the pilot, a woman named Yoon, who looked barely old enough to vote, executed a maneuver that turned physics into poetry. Her fighter spun, rolled, and came up underneath a Chromath landing craft. 4 missiles launched at point-blank range. The landing craft exploded, debris scattering into the atmosphere. "Splash 1 boat," Yoon reported, already lining up her next target. "These bugs fly like they're drunk." They weren't drunk. They just weren't used to prey that fought back. On the ground, Major Hyun-ko kicked open the door of a civilian shelter. His armor systems had taken a beating, and he was pretty sure he had at least 2 broken ribs. But none of that mattered right now. Inside the shelter, he found 63 Velaran civilians huddled in the darkness, terrified and certain they were about to die. "Earth Defense Force, United Nations Marines," Hyun announced, his armor's translator converting his words to Velaran. "We're getting you out. Stay calm, follow my people, and we'll have you safe in 10 minutes. A young Velaran girl, maybe 8 years old, stared at him with huge eyes. "Are you really human from the Death World?" Hyun crouched down to her level, his helmet retracted, showing his face. He tried to smile reassuringly, though he knew he probably just looked tired and bloody. "Yeah, kid. We're from Earth, and we're here to help. My teacher said humans are scary." "Your teacher was probably right." Hyun's helmet snapped back into place. "But right now, we're the scariest thing the bad guys have to deal with, so you're going to be just fine." Outside, his Marines had formed a defensive perimeter. Sergeant Jae Won stood at the choke point with a heavy weapon, calmly firing 3-round bursts into the advancing Chromath warriors. Each burst was placed with surgical precision. Headshots, center mass, whatever worked. "Major, we've got movement on the western approach," Jay reported. "Looks like 30, maybe 40 hostiles. Can you hold?" "Can I hold?" Jay laughed, a sound without humor. "Sir, I'm from Busan. My grandmother could hold this position. Give me 5 minutes and some more ammunition." The Chromath hit their line like a wave breaking against a cliff. The Marines met them with everything they had. Rifles barked. Grenades exploded. When the Chromath got too close, the Marines switched to close combat, and that was when things got truly ugly. A Chromath warrior swung a blade limb at Jay's head. He ducked, stepped inside its reach, and drove a combat knife up through the gap in its natural armor. The creature shrieked and fell. Another took its place immediately. Jay shot it 3 times in what he hoped was its face, then turned to engage the next target. This was what humans did. This was what evolution on Earth had created. Not the strongest species, not the fastest, but the ones who simply refused to stop fighting, no matter how bad the odds became. In orbit, the battle raged on. The Indomitable had taken terrible damage but kept fighting. Yuna's carrier had lost a quarter of its fighter wing but launched more to replace them. The hospital ship, crewed by Dr. Su Kang and her medical staff, moved through the combat zone, treating casualties with the same efficiency that the warships used to destroy enemies. "Commander, the flagship is hailing us," Yuna's communications officer reported. "Admiral Tay wants a status report." Yuna glanced at the tactical display. Half their ships showed yellow or red status indicators. Casualty reports were climbing. The Chromath swarm still had overwhelming numbers. By any reasonable measure, this operation was a disaster. "Tell the Admiral we're holding the line and the evacuation is proceeding on schedule." "Should I mention our current damage status?" "He can read the same displays I can. He doesn't need me to tell him we're taking a beating." Yuna watched as another fighter wing launched from her carrier. "What he needs to know is that we're not leaving until every civilian is safe." The battle continued for 3 more hours. 3 hours of constant combat, constant danger, constant death. The humans lost 2 destroyers, their crews dying when the ships exploded under concentrated Chromath fire. Dozens of fighters never returned to their carriers. Marine drop teams were cut off, surrounded, and forced to fight their way out through impossible odds. But the civilians were evacuated. Every shelter that called for help was answered. Every hospital that needed defending was defended. The human fleet stood between Thesera Prime and total destruction, and they held that line with blood and determination. Finally, as the human ships began to run out of ammunition and spare parts, the Chromath swarm withdrew. They hadn't been destroyed, but they'd been hurt badly enough to make them reconsider the attack. The Chromath consumed weak prey. These humans were not weak. As the last Chromath ships jumped away, Yuna allowed herself to slump in her chair. Around her, the bridge crew looked equally exhausted. They'd won, but victory felt hollow when she counted the cost. "Get me a full casualty report," she ordered quietly, "and someone contact the surface teams. I want to know Major Hyun's status." The response came back 10 minutes later. Hyun was alive, injured but functioning. His Marines had held every position they'd been assigned. Not a single civilian shelter under their protection had been lost. Jae-won had personally killed 47 Chromath warriors. He'd also carried 6 wounded veteran civilians through 2 kilometers of combat zone to reach the evacuation point. When asked how he'd managed it, his response was simple. It needed doing. That was the human way. It needed doing, so they did it. Regardless of cost, regardless of danger, regardless of whether anyone would ever thank them for it. Ambassador Kale's voice came over the general frequency. "Human fleet, this is Thesera Prime Central Command. We don't have adequate words. You saved us. You saved millions of lives. Thank you." Yuna keyed her microphone. "Ambassador, this is Commander Bay. You're welcome. Now, if you don't mind, we have wounded to treat and ships to repair. We'll be in orbit if you need us." She closed the channel and looked at her crew. They looked back at her with tired eyes and proud faces. They'd done the impossible today. They'd proven that humans belonged among the stars. Even if the stars hadn't wanted them. The medical bay of the Indomitable smelled like blood, antiseptic, and something else that Dr. Su Kang couldn't quite identify. Desperation, maybe, or determination. She moved between beds, checking vital signs, administering medication, offering words of comfort that felt inadequate in the face of such suffering. 40% casualties. That was the final count. 4 out of every 10 humans who had come to Thesera Prime were dead or wounded. 2 destroyers completely destroyed with all hands lost. The numbers were staggering, but Sue had stopped thinking in numbers hours ago. Now she only saw faces. Lieutenant Yoon lay in bed, 17, her legs gone below the knees. The fighter pilot had ejected at the last second when her craft took a direct hit. The ejection system had saved her life but not her legs. Sue had performed the amputations herself, working through tears she couldn't afford to shed during surgery. "Doc?" Yoon's voice was weak but alert. Pain medication could only do so much. "Did we get them all? The civilians?" Sue checked the IV drip. "Every shelter you marked got evacuated. You did good." "My flight instructor always said I flew too aggressively." Yoon tried to smile. It didn't quite work. "Guess he was right. Your aggressive flying saved lives today." "Yeah." Yoon closed her eyes. "Still sucks, though." Sue moved to the next bed. Sergeant J. Wan sat upright despite his injuries, refusing to lie down. He had a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, severe lacerations across his back, and exhaustion so deep that his body was shutting down. But he'd insisted on staying conscious to help inventory the medical supplies. "Sergeant, you need to rest," Sue told him for the 5th time. "I'll rest when everyone else is taken care of, Doc, not before." It was pointless to argue. Sue had learned that Marines defined mission complete very differently than normal people. For Jay, the mission wouldn't be complete until every wounded person had been treated and every supply had been counted. A soft chime announced a visitor. Sue looked up to see Ambassador Kale standing at the entrance to the medical bay. The Velaran diplomat looked small, fragile, and utterly lost. His elegant feathers were ruffled, his eyes were haunted. "Dr. Kang, may I enter?" Sue nodded, too tired to manage proper diplomatic protocols. "Come in, Ambassador, though I should warn you, it's not pleasant in here." Kyle stepped inside and stopped, frozen by what he saw. Rows of beds filled with injured humans, some sleeping under medication, some staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes, some missing limbs, all bearing the marks of terrible combat. "These are your wounded," Kyle whispered. "From the battle." "These are the lucky ones," Sue replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "The ones who made it back alive." Kale walked slowly between the beds, looking at each face. He stopped beside Lieutenant Yoon. "You're a pilot?" Yoon opened her eyes. "Was a pilot. Not sure what I am now." "You saved the shelter where my daughter was hiding." Kale's voice broke. "Red Leader, they called you. You destroyed the landing craft that was targeting her position. I saw the recording." "Oh." Yoon absorbed this information. "That's good. Glad she's safe." "You lost your legs saving her?" "Lost my legs doing my job." Yoon's tone was matter-of-fact. "Same thing happened to pilots who came before me. Same thing will happen to pilots who come after. That's how this works." Kyle looked like he was going to say something else, but movement caught his attention. Captain Day had entered the medical bay, walking with visible pain. His uniform was torn, his face was bruised, and he had bandages visible under his collar. But he was standing, moving, checking on his crew. Day stopped at each bed, speaking quietly to the injured. He knew their names, knew their families, knew their stories. This wasn't a captain performing an obligatory duty. This was a man mourning every single loss, every single injury, every single sacrifice his people had made. When Day reached the bed of a young ensign who would never walk again, he knelt down and took the man's hand. "Your parents would be proud," Day said softly. "I'm proud. You held your position when most people would have run. You saved lives today." The ensign managed a weak smile. "Worth it then, sir." Kale watched this interaction, his understanding of humans shifting with every moment. These weren't mindless warriors seeking glory. They were people who understood the cost of violence and paid it anyway because someone had to. "Captain Day?" Kyle approached carefully. "May I speak with you?" Day stood, moving like his entire body hurt. "Ambassador, good to see you're safe. Your daughter?" "Safe, thanks to your people." "Captain, I need to understand something." Kale struggled to find the right words. "Why did you come? My people voted to exclude humans from the coalition. We called you dangerous, primitive, unsuitable for civilized space. We rejected you completely." Day was quiet for a moment, looking around the medical bay at his wounded crew. "You called for help. That's all that mattered. But we treated you so poorly." "Ambassador, with respect, that doesn't matter right now." Day's voice was tired but firm. "When someone screams for help, you don't stop to check if they like you. You don't ask if they've been kind to you in the past. You run toward the screaming. That's what being human means. Even if it cost you this much," Kyle gestured at the wounded, "you lost so many people. People who had no obligation to die for us. They had the only obligation that matters, the obligation to help those who can't help themselves." Day moved to the viewport, looking down at the Sarah Prime. Earth taught us hard lessons, Ambassador. Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned that survival means helping each other, protecting the weak, standing together against the darkness. The Coalition said you were too aggressive. We are aggressive, very aggressive, but not the way you thought. Day turned to face Kale directly. We're not aggressive in conquering, we're aggressive in protecting. Once we decide someone needs help, we don't stop until they're safe, even if it kills us. Kyle felt something shift in his chest. Understanding, perhaps. Or shame. I voted to reject your species from the Coalition. I know. Read your file. Day smiled, but there was no anger in it. You thought you were protecting the galaxy from dangerous primitives. Maybe you were right. We are dangerous. But we're dangerous to the things that hurt innocent people. A medical alarm beeped urgently. Dr. Sue rushed to a bed where a Marine was crashing. She worked frantically, calling for equipment, fighting to keep the man alive. Kale watched her work with desperate determination, refusing to accept loss, refusing to give up. After 5 minutes that felt like hours, the alarm silenced. The Marine's vitals stabilized. Sue leaned against the bed, breathing hard, looking like she might collapse, but she was smiling. Got him, she whispered. Not today, Death. Not today. Kale realized something profound in that moment. These humans didn't just fight enemies aggressively. They fought death itself with the same intensity. Every patient was a battle. Every saved life was a victory. They applied warrior intensity to everything, including mercy. Over the next few days, Kale spent time with the human fleet. He watched engineers like Quan Nam work impossible hours to repair damaged ships. He saw Marines like Sergeant Jae Won helping rebuild civilian structures despite their own injuries. He observed pilots like Lieutenant Yoon, learning to use prosthetic legs with the same determination they'd shown in combat. The humans didn't celebrate their victory. They mourned their dead with ceremonies that were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Flag-draped coffins were launched into space with full military honors. Captain Day stood vigil over each one, whispering words that Kale couldn't hear but could feel. On the 5th day, Kale visited the Indomitables Memorial Wall. Every human lost in the battle had their name engraved here, along with a simple phrase, "They answered the call." Kale placed his hand on the wall, feeling the names under his fingers. These people had died for a species that had rejected them. They died because helping others was more important than pride or politics or past grievances. Ambassador, Lieutenant Hana approached quietly. Are you all right? Kyle looked at the young communications officer. I need to do something, Lieutenant. I need to make sure the galaxy knows what your people did here, what you sacrificed, what you gave without being asked. Hana was quiet for a moment. The galaxy didn't want to know about us before. Then I'll make them listen. Kyle straightened his diplomatic robes. I'll make them understand that the species they feared might be exactly the species the galaxy needs. That's a nice thought, Ambassador, but the Coalition doesn't change its mind easily. Then I'll change it for them. Kyle looked at the memorial wall one more time. These people earned their place among the stars. I'm going to make sure they get it. The Coalition Council chamber was designed to impress and intimidate. Massive columns rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Representatives from 47 species sat in a circular arrangement, each positioned to show equal importance. At the center, a platform waited for those called to testify. Fleet Admiral Nari Song stood on that platform, hands clasped behind her back, posture perfect despite the hostile stares directed at her. She wore her full dress uniform with every medal she'd earned in 30 years of service. The medals were impressive, but they meant nothing here. These beings looked at her and saw only a threat. Counselor Praxis, a reptilian saurian whose scales gleamed green under the chamber lights, spoke first. His voice was smooth, cultured, and cold. Admiral Song, you have been summoned to explain the unauthorized military action taken by human forces in Coalition space. With respect, Counselor, there was nothing unauthorized about defending a member species from attack. Nari's voice carried clearly through the chamber. The Sarah Prime broadcast a general distress signal. We responded. You responded after being explicitly excluded from coalition membership. Your presence in our space violates the territorial accords. The territorial accords include an emergency clause allowing any spacefaring species to respond to distress signals. We invoked that clause. Nari looked directly at Praxis. Unless the Council has changed the laws since yesterday? Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. The emergency clause was ancient, written when the coalition was young and danger lurked in every corner of space. It had been invoked exactly 3 times in 2,000 years. The clause was never intended for species outside the coalition, Praxis argued. The clause doesn't specify coalition membership. It says any spacefaring species capable of rendering aid must do so when requested. We were capable. We were requested. We responded. Nari kept her tone respectful but firm. If the Council wishes to rewrite that law, they're welcome to do so. But they can't apply it retroactively to punish us for following the rules as written. Ambassador Ari Shin watched from the diplomatic gallery, proud of her admiral but worried about the outcome. The Council wasn't interested in legal arguments. They were interested in finding reasons to exclude humanity permanently. A smaller counselor, a crystalline being from Quen Minor, spoke up. Admiral, your forces engaged in combat that resulted in significant casualties. The Velarin report states that 40% of your personnel were killed or wounded. Such losses suggest reckless tactics, unsuitable for civilized warfare. Nari turned to face the Quen representative. Counselor, with respect, there is no such thing as civilized warfare. There is only survival and death. We took casualties because we prioritized civilian evacuations over our own safety. Would you prefer we had protected ourselves and let innocents die? We prefer that military operations be conducted with appropriate caution and— There was no time for caution, Nari interrupted, then caught herself. Forgive me, Counselor, but the Chromath were actively destroying civilian shelters. Every minute we spent being cautious was a minute more people died. We made the choice to trade our safety for theirs. That's what warriors do. Perhaps that is the problem, Praxis said softly. Your species thinks like warriors. You solve every problem with violence. Nari was about to respond when a new voice cut through the chamber. Actually, Counselor, I think you'll find the humans solved our problem quite effectively. Ambassador Kale walked onto the floor of the chamber, his diplomatic credentials displayed on a holographic badge. Technically, he wasn't scheduled to speak yet, but Coalition protocol allowed any member species to address the Council during open session. Ambassador Kale, Praxis acknowledged with visible displeasure. You are not on the speaker schedule. I'm invoking my right of immediate testimony regarding an attack on Velarin territory. The Council granted this right after the Pharos raids 2 centuries ago. Kyle moved to stand beside Nari. And I wish to present evidence. Evidence of what? Praxis demanded. Evidence that the Chromath attack on Thesera Prime was not random. Evidence that someone provided them with our defense codes, patrol schedules, and fleet positions. Kale activated a data display. Evidence of conspiracy within the coalition itself. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted, demanded order, called for Kale's removal, but the evidence was already displaying for everyone to see. Encrypted communications between coalition military officials and unknown contacts. Payment transfers from defense contractors to shell companies. Detailed intelligence reports on Velarin defenses that should have been classified. Commander Tae Min stepped forward from where he'd been waiting in the shadows. The intelligence officer had spent weeks tracing the data, following digital breadcrumbs across a dozen star systems. Now he presented his findings with clinical precision. The conspiracy involves at least 17 individuals across 8 species, Tae Min explained. They operate a protection racket, attack weak worlds, or allow attacks to happen, then charge enormous fees to defend those worlds after the fact. The Chromath attack on Thesera Prime was supposed to fail, but only after enough damage to make the Velarin desperate enough to pay anything for protection. This is absurd, Praxis declared. But his voice had lost some of its confidence. Is it? Kale turned to face the Saurian counselor directly. Then explain why your military liaison transmitted Velarin defense codes to an encrypted address 3 days before the attack. Explain why contractors you recommend personally have made billions from protection contracts with vulnerable worlds. I have done nothing illegal. Perhaps, perhaps not. But you've certainly done nothing ethical. Kale's voice was hard. You and others like you have turned the Coalition's mutual defense into a profit center. You've made species pay for the protection that should be their right as members. The chamber descended into chaos. Counselors argued, accused, defended. Some demanded immediate investigation. Others called for Kale's arrest for slander. Through it all, Nari stood silent, watching the Coalition tear itself apart. Finally, an ancient counselor from the Pharos worlds called for order. The Pharos were one of the founding species, and their voice carried weight. Enough. These are serious accusations that require serious investigation. But first, we must address the immediate question. What do we do about the humans? We quarantine them, Praxis said immediately, desperate to redirect attention. We forbid human ships from entering Coalition space. We make it clear that vigilante military action will not be tolerated. Vigilante? Nari spoke quietly, but everyone heard her. We saved millions of lives. We lost hundreds of our own doing it. We asked for nothing in return. That's not vigilante action, Counselor. That's exactly what the Coalition is supposed to stand for. Or did I misunderstand your founding principles? You are not part of the Coalition, Praxis shot back. No, we're not. You made that very clear when you rejected our application. You called us too violent, too primitive, too dangerous. Nari's eyes swept the chamber. But when violence came to your doorstep, when danger threatened one of your own, we were the ones who answered. Not because we're part of your club, because it was the right thing to do. Ambassador Ares stood up in the gallery. The human delegation formally requests recognition. The ancient Pharos counselor nodded. Granted. Ari walked down to the floor, standing beside Nari and Kyle. The Earth government has authorized me to make the following statement. Humanity does not need the Coalition's approval to do what's right. We will continue to respond to distress calls in our region of space. We will continue to defend those who cannot defend themselves. You can call it vigilante action if you want. We call it basic decency. If you permit this, you set a dangerous precedent, Praxis warned the Council. Any species can claim they were just helping. Any species can use military force without oversight. You're right, Kale said. That is dangerous, which is why I'm proposing something different. He took a breath, knowing this next part would change everything. The Velaran Empire invokes the ancient right of blood debt. The humans shed their blood defending Velaran territory. By the oldest laws of this coalition, laws written by the founding species themselves, any species who defends a member world with their own lives has earned the right to stand among us. The chamber fell silent. The blood debt law was ancient, yes? But it had been invoked only twice in coalition history and never in the last 1,000 years. Most counselors had forgotten it even existed. I formally nominate humanity for emergency membership in the Galactic Coalition, Kale continued, and I call for an immediate vote. Praxis looked like he'd been struck. This is unprecedented, irregular. The Council needs time to deliberate. The Council has had 2 years to deliberate, Kyle interrupted. 2 years to judge whether humans were worthy. Now they've proven their worth in the only way that truly matters. With blood and sacrifice. The law is clear. We vote now. The ancient Pharos counselor studied the humans for a long moment. Then he looked at Kale and nodded slowly. The blood debt right has been invoked. By our founding laws, we must vote. All counselors, prepare your decision. We will determine humanity's fate within the hour. Nari stood straight, maintaining her military bearing. But inside, she felt the weight of the moment. The next hour would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained forever exiled among the stars. Ambassador Ari leaned close and whispered, "Did we do enough?" Nari looked at the faces of the counselors. Some showed respect. Some showed fear. Some showed anger. We did all we could. Now we wait and see if the galaxy has room for warriors who fight for others instead of themselves. The vote had been delayed. For 3 days, the Coalition Council debated behind closed doors while humanity waited for judgment. Admiral Nari stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, Earth's flagship, watching the stars, and wondering if this was as close to joining the galactic community as her species would ever get. Then, the alarm started screaming. Admiral, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures across multiple sectors. The sensor officer's voice was tight with stress. Chromath swarm vessels, hundreds of them. They're hitting 6 coalition worlds simultaneously. Nari felt her blood run cold. This wasn't a raid. This was an invasion. Show me. The tactical display lit up with red markers. The crystalline cities of Quen Minor under attack. The agricultural world of Harvest burning. The industrial complex of Ferris 4 being overrun. 3 other worlds flashing distress signals. Have they targeted any human colonies? Nari asked. No, Admiral. They're bypassing our territory completely. This is a direct assault on the Coalition. Nari understood immediately. The Chromath hive mind had learned from Thessera Prime. They'd identified humanity as the primary threat and decided to eliminate them by destroying the Coalition first. Attack the Alliance, force humanity to spread its forces thin, then finish them off when they were weak and alone. It was actually a smart strategy. If the Chromath had been facing anyone else. Communications, get me the fleet commanders, all of them, now. Nari turned to her tactical officer. How long until the Council's nearest fleets can respond? 2 days minimum for most of them, Admiral. These worlds will fall long before then. 2 days. The Coalition was about to lose 6 worlds because their military doctrine prioritized caution over speed, preservation over sacrifice. They would arrive too late, survey the devastation, and write reports about lessons learned. The human fleet commanders appeared on Nari's display. Captain Day, healed but scarred from Thessera Prime. Commander Yuna, looking tired but determined. 5 other captains, all veterans, all understanding what she was about to ask. You've all seen the situation, Nari said. 6 Coalition worlds under attack. The Council fleet is too far away. We're the only ones close enough to help. Admiral, the Council hasn't voted on our membership yet, Day pointed out. Technically, these aren't our worlds to defend. I know. They called us too violent, too dangerous, too primitive to join their civilization. Commander Yuna's voice was hard. They rejected us, made it clear we weren't good enough for them. I know that too. And you're still going to ask us to save them, Day finished. Nari looked at her commanders. These warriors who had already sacrificed so much. I'm not asking. This is a volunteer mission. If you want to stay here, protect our own territory and let the Coalition face the consequences of their prejudice, I will understand. No one would blame you. We owe them nothing. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Valkyrie, this is indomitable, Day said. We're going. Question is just where you want us. Defiant Storm volunteering for Harvest, Yuna added. We've got the carrier wings to protect agricultural zones. One by one, every commander volunteered. Every single one. Because that was what humans did when people needed help. They didn't check if those people liked them first. Split into 6 task forces, Nari ordered, feeling pride and dread mixing in her chest. Each world gets 1 group. Move fast, fight hard, and for the love of everything holy, try to come back alive. Admiral, it was Lieutenant Hana from the Indomitable. What about Earth? If the Chromath are planning to eliminate humanity, they'll hit our homeworld eventually. I've recalled the home defense fleet. Admiral Tay will command Earth's protection. Nari's jaw tightened. We're gambling that our orbital defenses can hold long enough. And if they can't? Then we make sure these 6 worlds survive. Because if we fall, at least the galaxy will remember that humanity died protecting others instead of ourselves. The fleet split apart, each task force jumping to hyperspace. Nari's group headed for Ferros 4, the industrial world where billions lived and worked. If Ferros fell, the Coalition's manufacturing capacity would be crippled. They dropped out of hyperspace into hell. The Chromath swarm had numbers even worse than at Thessera Prime. The Ferros defense fleet was already shattered, debris fields marking where proud ships had died. All ships, engage at will. Priority targets are landing craft and troop carriers. Keep them off the surface as long as possible. Nari watched the tactical display, counting impossible odds, accepting them, and moving forward anyway. And somebody get me a secure channel to the Pharos government. Tell them the humans have arrived. On Harvest, Commander Yuna's carrier group found the agricultural world's orbital platforms destroyed and Chromath ships landing in the crop zones. Millions of tons of food were burning, food that would feed dozens of coalition worlds. This isn't military, Yuna said quietly. This is genocide. They're not just attacking, they're trying to starve the entire coalition. Then we stop them. Major Hyun was already loading his Marines into drop pods. Agricultural zones are wide open terrain. No cover, no fortifications. My people are going to be exposed. Can you do it? Hyun checked his weapons, his face grim. We're Marines, Commander. We can do anything once. Question is whether we'll be around to do it twice. The drop pods launched. Hyun and his Marines fell through the atmosphere toward the burning fields, knowing this might be their last mission, doing it anyway because crops needed protecting and people needed food. At Quen Minor, Captain Day found the crystalline cities under siege. The Quen were a peaceful species, their military barely functional. The Chromath were systematically destroying their beautiful crystal structures, turning architectural marvels into shattered ruins. Tactical, how long can we hold? Day asked. Honestly, sir, we're outnumbered 30-1. Best case, we buy them 6 hours. Then we buy them 6 hours. Day looked at his crew, seeing exhaustion and determination in equal measure. And maybe a little more if we're stubborn about it. The Indomitable charged into the Chromath formation, weapons blazing, accepting damage, returning it tenfold. The ship was already scarred from Thesra Prime, patches and repairs visible across its hull. It looked like it should be in dry dock, not combat. But appearances were deceiving. The Indomitable was a human ship, crewed by Deathworlders who didn't know how to quit. As long as engines worked and weapons fired, they would keep fighting. On Earth, Admiral Tay watched the massive Chromath Superhive ship drop out of hyperspace. It dwarfed anything humanity had ever built, a living vessel the size of a small moon. The hive mind had sent its greatest weapon to destroy the death world that dared resist. All orbital platforms target that ship. All surface batteries prepare to fire. Every ship we have, launch now. Tay's voice was calm despite the fear in his heart. This was his home. If he failed here, everything was lost. The defense platforms opened fire, magnetic accelerators hurling slugs at relativistic speeds. Nuclear warheads detonated against the superhive's organic armor. Laser batteries carved lines of destruction across its surface. The superhive kept coming, shrugging off damage that would have destroyed 100 normal ships. Sir, it's launching landing craft, Lieutenant Hana reported from Seoul Orbital Station. Thousands of them. They're targeting every major city. Then we stop them at the cities. Ground forces, this is Admiral Tay. Weapons free on all Chromath targets. Show them what happens when you attack Earth. The battle raged across the planet and in orbit above it. The Chromath had numbers and size. Humans had home advantage and fury. Every soldier, every pilot, every citizen with a weapon joined the fight. Because this was Earth. This was home. And humans protected their home with everything they had. For 6 hours, the human task forces held their positions. 6 hours of desperate combat across 6 worlds. Ships that should have retreated kept fighting. Marines who should have been overrun held their ground. Pilots flew missions that should have been suicide runs and somehow made it back. The casualties were horrific. Every task force was bleeding, losing people, running out of ammunition and spare parts. But they didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They stood between civilians and monsters, and they held the line. Then, as Nari watched her ammunition counters drop towards 0 and prepared to order a ramming attack against the Chromath flagship, something incredible happened. New contacts appeared on sensors, dozens of them. Coalition ships emerging from hyperspace in formation. The Velerans sent their rebuilt fleet. The Quen diverted their merchant vessels and armed them. The Saurians, even Counselor Praxis's people, sent warships. And at the head of the formation, Ambassador Kale's voice came over the general frequency. Human Fleet. This is the Coalition Emergency Response Force. We received your SOS. We're 3 hours early, but we thought you might appreciate prompt service. Nari felt tears on her cheeks. Ambassador, we didn't send an SOS. You didn't have to. Your actions were message enough. Kale's ship moved into formation beside the Valkyrie. The council vote concluded during your battle. The decision was unanimous. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Coalition, effective immediately. All 47 species voted yes. Councillor Praxis abstained, but he didn't vote no. The rest voted to accept you. Kale's voice was warm. Apparently, risking your lives to save worlds that rejected you made quite an impression. The combined human coalition fleet turned the tide. At Pharos 4, the Chromath broke and fled. At Harvest, Major Hyun's exhausted Marines got reinforcements and drove the invaders off the planet. At Quen Minor, Captain Day's battered task force finally got relief. At Earth, the Coalition fleet arrived just as the Super Hive ship breached the final defensive line. 50 warships, representing a dozen species, all coming to protect the death world that had protected them. The Super Hive tried to fight, tried to complete its mission, but it was overwhelmed. The last Chromath vessel died in orbit above Earth, its wreckage burning up in the atmosphere. 6 months later, the Sarah Prime hosted the formal ceremony. Admiral Nari stood with Ambassador Aerie as Earth's banner was raised alongside the 47 other Coalition members. Captain Day received the Coalition Medal of Valor, as did Commander Yuna, Major Hyun, Lieutenant Hana, and 300 other humans who had gone above and beyond. The ceremony was dignified and proper. But afterward, Nari found herself in a quiet garden with Ambassador Kale, watching Velarin children playing with Sergeant Jay Wan. The grizzled Marine was teaching them some Earth game involving throwing a ball, laughing as the children cheered. They adore him, Kale observed. That man killed 47 Chromath warriors in single combat, and now he's playing with children like he's their grandfather. That's humanity, Nari said. We're warriors when we need to be. But being a warrior isn't who we are. It's just what we do when people need protecting. The galaxy was afraid of you. Some still are. I know, but fear is better than indifference. Nari looked up at the sky where human and coalition ships patrolled together. The galaxy didn't want us, but now they need us, and maybe that's enough. More than enough, Kale said. The galaxy has learned something important. When the darkness comes, when hope seems lost, when everyone else is too far away or too afraid, the humans will come. They'll always come. Above them, Earth's destroyer, Indomitable, passed overhead in formation with a Velarin cruiser. 2 ships from 2 worlds, different in every way, united by a simple truth. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth dying for. And the humans, those Deathworlders from a planet that tried to kill them every day, understood that better than anyone. The galaxy had rejected them once. But now, the stars themselves sang with stories of humanity's courage. And in every corner of Coalition space, when parents told their children about heroes, they spoke of the day the humans came when nobody else would. They spoke of the day the Deathworlders proved that the strongest warriors are those who fight for others, not for themselves.